VigilanteWilliamson here with a very simple question. That is, how good is Oleksandr Usyk really? Spoiler alert, he's very good. And this video is not necessarily an indictment on him, but it may be an indictment on his era and on this era of sports talk in general. How hyperbolous everything has to be. The inability to just give people the credit they deserve without being hyperbolous one way or another. Before we get too deep into this video, please, if you like the content we do here, like the video. And if you're so obliged to share and subscribe, I would appreciate that as well. Now, going into the big fight with him and Tyson Fury, I wanted Usyk to win just because Fury is a scumbag. Now everyone sees how much of a scumbag he can be with him talking about the Ukraine situation. And I picked Usyk to win, which you can check in my preview video that I did Friday, and Usyk won. So I'm happy with Usyk winning. I think Usyk is an all-time great fighter. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think Usyk's great. I love Usyk. He's a great fighter. He deserves his credit. But then people have to just add so much hot sauce on it. First off, as much as Tyson Fury can be a scumbag, he's also a great fighter. It was a close fight. There's a reason people want to see a rematch. It was a good fight between two really good fighters. So Tyson Fury's not just a bum overnight, by the way, guys. He's not just a terrible bum. And now everybody realizes, oh, he's only had 6 or 7 championship matches, and most of them were against the same guy. Well, yeah, he did. And you called him the GOAT and the pound for pound, which we'll get into my issue with heavyweights being pound for pound in a second. But yeah, you overrated him. Doesn't mean he wasn't still a great fighter in his own right and somebody else who probably deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, but you overrated him basically off of 2 wins, and now that he's lost, he's a bum. And it's like, okay, how can both Usyk be great for winning against this bum? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So that I just had to address. I'm just sick of this hyperbolous thing. We see it in the NBA too. Oh, Jokic is a plumber. Oh, Jokic is the MVP. He's one of the great, and I think Jokic is one of the greatest players of all time, just based upon his offensive skill set. But he can't be beat because he's a human, and now he's just a plumber again. And it's Jordan, and it's just like, does everything have to be so extreme and so hyperbolous? Can we let things play out and give people time? I think it's the LeBron Jordan effect, where you have to bring down somebody else to talk about how great someone else is, and I don't like it. And I'm seeing it starting to happen with Usyk, and I don't like that because Usyk is a great fighter, but he is penalized by his era if we start going against all-time great. First off, let's get to the pound for pound thing. And I said this before on VigilanteWilliamson Vengeance, a kind of defunct sports channel, and it's defunct because of the nature of sports talk this day. I can't just do a sports channel. I realize that because I'm just not as hyperbolous and as much of a bullshit artist as everyone else. In any event, I've said that pound for pound shouldn't be for heavyweights. The entire point of pound for pound fighters these are the fighters outside of the heavyweight division that are great. To put a heavyweight on the pound for pound list, especially at number 1, defeats the entire purpose of the pound for pound list. Now, I get, because we're in the era of the internet and people use P4P and GOAT hyperbolously, again, I'm going to keep using that word, and people just spam it. So it's like it loses some of its meaning. But I like maintaining the original idea of pound for pound. So that means Inoue is currently my pound for pound number 1, pending what happens with Bud Crawford's fight later on this year, because those are my 1 and 2. And speaking of these 2 fighters, for everyone who wants to use that oft and overused GOAT, greatest of all time acronym, I think similar to Usyk, they'll have issues, 10, 15 years from now when you compare them to all the other all-time great fighters. And it's not their fault. It's not really their fault. I'm not trying to blame them for this overly political era where guys don't fight as much and guys don't fight each other and guys don't really fight in their prime. I don't care what anyone tells me, even though I predicted it wrong. Errol Spence ducked Bud Crawford for years. He tried to age Bud Crawford out. He ended up aging himself out. Rest in peace, Mo 3. If you know, you know. And Usyk has similar issues with Tyson Fury. Shit, I didn't think the fight was going to happen till it happened. And Deontay Wilder on a lower level, because Deontay Wilder didn't really want to fight him. So I get it. I'm not saying it's necessarily their fault, but when you look at all-time greats, I mean, Fucking Sugar Ray Robinson has like 150 some odd fights. Archie Moore 186 fights, and Usyk has 22. I know he has a lot of amateur fights. Roberto Duran 100+ fights, fought from the 60s to 2001. I mean, some of these careers that some of these great fighters have had are unrepeatable by this era. I get it. I get everything is bigger, faster, stronger, and we think everybody now is just they have to be better than anyone in the past. But it's like, man, some of those guys did things we'll never repeat. And I get this too when talking about some of the older guys. Yeah, there was some, recycling guys they beat once, they end up beating again. So yeah, there is some fuckery with some of those records, but still, the amount of fights they got in a year, just so much more than what we do now. And it's just like, how do I compare this? Hell, how do I compare it to the previous era? Manny Pacquiao has 8 world titles in 8 different divisions. How do you compare something to that? And even everyone's favorite, and maybe the big reason we have such a political era, Floyd Mayweather beat the most world champions ever. How do you, what do you do for this? How do you account for this type of stuff with these fighters? It's going to be very hard for them to compare favorably because their era just didn't have enough fights. They just didn't match up enough. And I had to look. Sugar Ray Robinson, 174 and 19, almost 200 fights. How do I compare somebody with 20 fights, especially if I want to use P4P GOAT? I can't compare them. It's just not fair to Usyk. It's not fair. Doesn't mean Usyk isn't a Hall of Famer. He only fought what he did in his era. He cleaned up everything in a short amount of fights. He deserves some credit for that as well. I'm not trying to blame Usyk or Bud or Nue for their era kind of being weak. And I don't mean weak as in there's not good fighters. I mean weak in just the mentality that a lot of guys had. Why when Sean Porter retired, it was such a big deal. It's like, geez, one of the few guys who's willing to go in the ring with anybody is gone. It's just the nature of the era. So they're not going to have as many fights as some of these older guys. Even again, the previous era. Emmanuel Dapadran Pacquiao, 62 and 8. Again, I know it's not the same division, but people are saying P4P GOAT. So that's why I'm comparing them pound for pound. This is why the pound for pound list is what it is. No, these guys, and this is not, I guess, just an indictment of Usyk. This is an indictment of this entire boxing era. You could include Inoue and Bud Crawford, who are also guys who I think deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, probably already Hall of Famers, all-time greats relative to this era. But then when you start comparing them to older guys, it's like, it's hard to do. Even everybody's favorite, Pretty Boy and Muddy Mayweather, Pretty Boy Floyd and Muddy Mayweather, 49-0. I'm not counting that Conor McGregor shit. That's bullshit. But 49-0, most world champions ever. Even if he did a lot of Triple H, I call it Triple H stuff, with all these different weight stipulations and catch weights and all this other stuff. Still, most world champions ever. And again, that's of this era as well, or of his era, because there's like 1 trillion belts now, trillion weight divisions. But still, I mean, yes, you could say it with Pacquiao with his 8 championship divisions. Still, it's very hard to compare any fighter from this era backwards. And I get it. I get that we want to live in the moment. I get that Usyk's a great fighter. Usyk deserves all his flowers. He's probably, if you want to say, hey, Oleksandr Usyk is the best heavyweight fighter of this era, or the best cruiserweight and heavyweight fighter of this era, I can't really refute you. Granted, he doesn't have that many big-time heavyweight wins. It's really just Joshua twice and Fury, and maybe Fury twice. We'll see what happens if there is a rematch, and we'll see if he wants to continue. That Dubois win may age well. Dubois is still a fairly young fighter and can be a world champion later on in life, so that win may age well. He beat up Breedis and a lot of those guys are cruiserweight in a quick amount of time, so he deserves his credit for that. But those guys unfortunately couldn't make the move up like he did, so it's not going to age maybe as well as it probably did at the time. Great fighter. I don't know if I'll favor him in every fight against history. If you go back to the heavyweights, going against the Muhammad Ali's and whoever else, the Ernie Shavers, you want to stay in the 70s, Joe Frazier, George Foreman, But hell, these guys had a lot of fights. Part of the reason we had a Buster Douglas is because these guys fought all the time. Never in a million years, if you already had a fight as big as Tyson and Holyfield eventually was, and would have been in the early 90s, never in a million years would you schedule a fight before that. Never. Never. I mean, I guess you did have Tank fight somebody before Ryan Garcia last year, but even that was thought of as rare. It was thought that both would get a warm up. Only Tank did. Most of the time, you don't have that. Guys were fighting 5 to 7 times a year, similar to Ali. You know, he loses to a Leon Spinks. He almost loses to a Chuck Wepner because he's fighting all the goddamn time. And I know, again, it's not Usyk's fault. He didn't create a pandemic. He didn't create all these, you know, motherfuckers who don't really want to smoke. It wasn't his idea, but he's not fighting as often as these other guys. So how do I rank him against those other guys? When we talk about all-time great, can't we just say, hey, for this era, he's the best? What's wrong with that? There's no shame in that. There's no shame in being the best of the era. And by the way, the other guys don't all suck. Tyson Fury's not just trash because he just lost a close fight. He may be trash as a person, but that's a whole other can of worms. As a fighter, he's still great. He gave Usyk a lot of smoke. He could have won that fight, which is why a rematch would be intriguing. Joshua isn't just trash. You know what I mean? Joshua might have Usyk again. What if he wins that fight? What do you do with Usyk then? So it's just like, listen, Usyk's a great fighter. I enjoy watching him fight. He deserves all the credit in the world, but he's not P4P GOAT, okay? And he's not P4P for the reasons I laid out, as far as pound for pound should be for non-heavyweights. But then when you even go back, P4P for different eras, it's like, no, he can't rank with Roberto Duran with 100+ fights over damn near 40 years, 30 years. That's insane. 33 years. I'm sorry, I did the math in my head. No, he doesn't. It doesn't rank like that. It doesn't work like that. And it's okay. It's okay to say this guy is great for this era, and I'm glad to be watching them. I'm glad to be witnessing them live. And when somebody else comes along, they're great for their era. We don't have to bring anyone down. We don't have to be disrespectful to anybody to show somebody's greatness. But what do you think? I've rambled for 12 minutes or so. I'll probably edit it down, maybe 11 minutes. In any event, if you like the video, please like the video. If you're so obliged to share and subscribe, please do that. Even if you do none of these things. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time. Good night. God bless. I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.